the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
From fantasy studs and duds to depth charts to the predictions of their record this season, we got it all on this show. And we're going to kick things off right off the get-go. We are going to talk about the Buffalo Bills coming off of last season there. Maybe a little bit of disappointment there towards the end, but you can't argue the success they had during the regular season, finishing the season at 13-3. Now, the Buffalo Bills, when you look at everything that they did last season, they scored 455 points. They had 286 points against, 7-1 at home, 6-2 on the road, while taking care of things within the division at 4-2. You put that all together, you have a recipe for success throughout the regular season, but doesn't necessarily translate to success once the playoffs start kicking around. Now, the Buffalo Bills, they had the third best scoring offense in the league, averaging 27.7 points per game, which was a little bit down from the season before when she averaged 29.8, but it was still one of the best units in the NFL, led by Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs. It also doesn't hurt when you see your yards per game totals go up from the season before, going from 389.3 yards per game to 394.9 yards per game over that same 2-year period, which ranks second last season. The Allen and Diggs connection, it hooked up 108 times for 1,429 yards and 11 touchdowns. Now, I said, despite that 14-3 regular season, things did trend a little bit downhill towards the end there, thanks to injuries. You had the loss of Von Miller, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer for a point there. That was just on the defensive side of the ball. And then you had that elbow injury to Josh Allen later on in the season that seemed to take a little bit of a bite away from this offense. Like 2020 and 2021, where the Bills lost the Chiefs in the playoffs, in 2022, the Bills would meet the same result in the playoffs, this time at the hands of Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, Tara, when we look at this tail of tape for the Buffalo Bills team, where did things go right for them, and where did they really go wrong? Is it those injuries? Was it the Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Von Miller injuries, or was it really that Josh Allen elbow injury that he seemed to play through, but it changed his offense altogether?
I mean, I think it was both of them. At the beginning of the season, that defense looked absolutely insane. I mean, it was clicking on all cylinders, and it looked like, it would be, and the Bills defense has always been extremely solid. But it looked like that grouping right there, healthy, was going to be on another level. And the injuries just really took the wind out of the sail. And then when you look on the offensive end with Josh Allen, I mean, the statistics, very clear. It was a very clear and visible decline immediately after that injury. And it obviously, Josh Allen was able to work through it a little bit. He still got that rushing upside. So it wasn't a complete loss for fantasy managers with Josh Allen. But obviously, the dramatic dip in production for Stefon Diggs was unreal. Went from, what was his Stefon Diggs? He was averaging 24.8 fantasy points per game when Josh Allen was healthy, weeks 1 through 8. Was it? Yeah. That's the number. Higher than Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. I mean, he was literally that guy looking like he was finally going to get that bounce back to that wide receiver 1 type of year that we saw before out of him. And then immediately after that, dipped to lower than 15 fantasy points per game in PPR. I mean, it was just, an obvious connection for me. So the injuries just really took it out on both ends. And I believe that, even though there's more competition in the division, I know we'll get to that in a little bit, but I do think that they'll get back on track healthy and are set to repeat the division this year.
Well, let's talk about this division, because when I look at this division, I sat down, I got my coloring crayons out there, my Crayola, I got the big old spreadsheet, and I marked down wins and losses and how it corresponds to the rest of the schedule. And I look at this Buffalo Bills team. I know there's a lot of competition with the Jets, with the Miami Dolphins again this season. New England Patriots can never really be counted out. They're already cheating. They're already getting OTAs taken away from them. So the Patriots are on top of their game right now. But you look at this Bills schedule. It starts off on Monday Night Football there, week number 1 against those New York Jets. Then they face the Raiders. Then they got the Commanders, the Dolphins, the Jaguars there in London. Then they go play the Giants, the Patriots, the Buccaneers before a Week 9 meeting with the Cincinnati Bengals, which is going to be a huge, huge game when it's all said and done. A game that never really took place last season, so a lot of people are very excited to see how that plays out. Week 10, they're back on Monday Night Football against the Denver Broncos. Then they got the Jets, the Eagles in week number 12 before they hit their bye in week number 13, just ahead of the Kansas City Chiefs contest in Arrowhead, followed by the Dallas Cowboys, the Los Angeles Chargers, the New England Patriots, and finally finishing up against the Miami Dolphins there to close out the season, which could be an absolutely huge game when it's all said and done. Now, when you look at this schedule, I've kind of got what my number is, and I think it's going to be disappointing to a lot of Bills fans because I look at this Bills team and I look at their roster, I look at what they did in the draft, and nothing they did really blows me away. I mean, they did some good plays. They got some good players in the draft, but you look, Dalton Kincaid, first-round pick, number 25. Then they got Osiris Torrance, their third-round pick, number 91. Dorian Williams, huge addition here, I think, for them, who looks like the rookie from Tulane, could be that middle linebacker for the Bills this season. Justin Shorter, then a lineman there, Nick Brocker, Alex Austin there, corner. Those were the moves that they made via free agency or via the draft there. And then via free agency, the biggest moves that they made were Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield, Damian Harris, Connor McGovern there on the offensive line, while losing Tremaine Edmonds, Isaiah McKenzie, Roger Saffold, Case Keenum, Devin Singletary. So when I look at what they've lost and what they've gained and what the rest of this division's done, because you got to remember, you got to play the Jets twice, you got to play the Miami Dolphins twice, and you got to play the New England Patriots twice on top of contests against the Chiefs, the Bengals this season. I look at this record and I still have the Buffalo Bills as my number one team in the AFC East, but it's not the record that maybe most people are thinking. I've got them winning this division at 11-6. What's your prediction for the Buffalo Bills here in 2023?
A little bit more optimistic, not by much. I would say 12-5. I think that's enough to win the division. It's going to be very competitive. I agree on that end, and I do think they'll still come out on top.
Yeah, just to give people kind of an idea of what I think. I think the game in week number 9, the Bengals game is going to be a loss for the Buffalo Bills. I think they're going to split with the Jets. I think they're going to split with the Dolphins. I think that's just that's going to happen between those teams. I think they're all pretty evenly matched up. The game in London against the let me just double check here what I've got going on. The Eagles game is going to be tough. The Chiefs game is going to be one of those ones. The Los Angeles Chargers one in Los Angeles where the Bills have to fly across the country to play in. I think that's a contest that the Bills could potentially lose just because of the travel thing. And again, that game against the Dolphins, that could be a huge one last week of the season. That's what I got them dropping. So those are some of the contests I got the Bills losing. And those are all pretty good teams. I don't see a bad loss in that bunch. So for this Bills team, it's just I look at this depth chart. And I don't know if you've looked at the depth chart yet. They're not deep. And this is probably the curse of paying big money to your quarterback, right? When money is invested into a certain position, it has to be taken elsewhere. So you got Josh Allen being backed up by Kyle Allen. James Cook, Damian Harris, Nyheim Hines, Latavius Murray in the running back room. Not bad. Wide receiver, Stefon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Khalil Shakir. And then you got Deontay Hardy. That's probably right on Shakir's back here when it comes to fantasy relevancy. But Desmond Patton, Trent Sherfield don't do a whole lot for me. Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid at the tight end positions. Then on defense, they're good at on the line. They're good on the back end. Some questions in the middle there. But you got Gregory Rousseau, Boogie Basham, Von Miller, and A.J. Esposeza on the edge. Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones there. Jordan Phillips, Tim Siddle there, manning the middle of that defensive line. Linebacker, Matt Milano, all pro, say what you will about him, but Dorian Williams and Terrell Bernard. And then when you look at the secondary, this is where they're really good if everyone's healthy. Tre'Davious White, Dane Jackson, Jordan Poyer, and Micah Hyde to kind of round out the starters there. And you also got guys like DeMar Hamlin, Kyer Elam, Taron Johnson, Taylor Rapp, which is a pretty good second unit that you can kind of mix in and out of the whole system there. Now, further to that, when we look at what the Bills did this offseason, what is the best move, in your opinion, that they made?
Oh, man. So I don't know if not. Granted, I like Damian Harris addition. I think it fits perfectly into what they're doing, and worked out well because they didn't get the opportunity to draft a running back that they might have wanted to draft. But I like the addition of Dalton Kincaid. I know it was a little rich in terms of draft capital, but I can see what they're doing there. And I know we look at this, as from a fantasy perspective and say, we've seen teams try to make it happen, before with, Mike Gesicki in a way of it's like, oh, he's not really he's not really a tight end. He's more of a receiver. We're going to use him as a receiver. And we've seen that, the results were kind of middling. But I do feel positively about, when I'm looking at the Bills and what they're trying to achieve, they drafted this guy with the specific intention of trying to put him in a position where he is utilized more from a receiving perspective. And we know that they've been looking for, Gabe Davis, he's, obviously a massive deep threat, inconsistent from a fantasy perspective, inconsistent from a wide receiver 2 perspective. When you're looking at ways to complete that offense as a whole, they need somebody who is going to be a little bit more reliable secondary target hog behind Stefon Diggs. They need somebody to excel in the slot. They couldn't find consistency with Isaiah McKenzie. I hope, we've all got promise for Khalil Shakir, obviously, but I think, Dalton Kincaid, if they utilize him properly, could fill that hole that they've been desperately looking for. So I like that addition as their best move.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen's always looking for someone to work out of the slot. Cole Beasley feasted there just a few seasons ago, so we know what comes in that fantasy relevancy from that position there. And let's not kid ourselves, Kincaid is not your typical tight end as far as fantasy is concerned. I'm a big Damien Harris guy. We know what Harris does. He's going to be that 2 yards and in kind of running back. Hopefully, his purpose on this team is not going to be to affect what James Cook does, but to maybe protect Josh Allen from himself when they get the ball in that 2-3 yard line on goal-to-goal type situations. Now, what about their worst move? What was the worst thing that the Bills did this offseason?
I don't really think they made any big mistakes. I know we let people go in free agency, and those are things that sometimes you have to do. Unfortunately, you mentioned, when you've got a quarterback that you have to pay, and he'll have an extension coming up as well. You've got to look at them and that costs. Obviously you've got to cut some corners elsewhere, so it kind of happens. But I don't really see any terrible moves for them. They didn't make any bad additions or things that didn't really make sense.
Yeah, and for me, it's Tremaine Edmonds. Unless Dorian Williams comes out there and he's absolutely balling out, and by all indications early, it looks like he's going to be the guy given that first opportunity there. But you're losing a young linebacker who's a Pro Bowl linebacker in 2019, 2020, started all 74 games, registered over 560 tackles there, interceptions. But then again, 4 years, $72 million. You know what? I could see why the Bills let that go with a rookie linebacker there. Now, as far as the top 5 fantasy assets go, here's how I have them ranked. Number 1, Josh Allen. With Diggs already in place, the addition of Dalton Kincaid gives Allen another target in the passing game, and that is a connection that has looked good already here in the OTAs. Dropped out Josh Allen there. Set it and forget it in your fantasy leagues this year. That's all there is to say about that. Stefon Diggs. Only Devontae Adams, Deontay Johnson had seen more than 140 targets per season that Stefon Diggs has seen over the last 3 years. And those targets, they're not going anywhere. Diggs' 28% targets per route run last season was the 6th most in the NFL. Number 3, James Cook. Cook averaged 5.7 yards per carry in 2022, making the most of his opportunities. If Buffalo gives him just 12 carries per contest, that works out to about 200 carries on the season and another 1,000-yard season. Gabriel Davis, number 4 fantasy option there. I'm still waiting for the Bills to trade for DeAndre Hopkins. But until that happens, you have to remember that Davis did see a league high 37% of his targets down in the red zone, even with Dawson Knox in tow. And then, of course, number 5, Dalton Kincaid. Tight ends don't usually make an immediate impact in fantasy. However, Kincaid is not your typical tight end when it comes to fantasy. He's basically a slot receiver. So you can take that rule and kind of throw it out when it comes to him. Expect him to be that Cole Beasley-like weapon deployed within this offense. Let's just call it the way it is there. Now, when you look at this from the fantasy side here, what is the top fantasy play for the Buffalo Bills?
I mean, it's Josh Allen. It's always Josh Allen. I know every single season we say, they want to run him less. They want to put, inflict less damage on him, but you can only control what a quarterback and his natural instincts are. So he'll continue to have that rushing upside. He'll continue to have those rushing touchdowns. And healthy Josh Allen with a good elbow is my QB1. So it's Josh Allen.
What about your sleeper one? Who's that sleeper that you're like, okay, you know what? This guy, things roll right for him. Could be the biggest deal here when it comes to the Buffalo Bills.
I mean, I don't know how deep it has to be. So maybe it's like a shallow sleeper, but I do think that despite the addition of Damian Harris, I do think that James Cook still has uh, good upside to end up as a a middle tier RB2. And when you're looking at that, I know a lot of people are kind of looking at him and thinking, well, we've added Damian Harris, so we've got the short yardage, early down guy, and then we're going to have James Cook as being the pass catching guy. I don't think that that's how they're going to split it. I don't think it's going to be a traditional kind of, a Detroit, you do this, you do that kind of split backfield. I think we're going to see this maybe integrate a little bit more, not quite like the Green Bay backfield, but a little bit more towards that, where James Cook still gets a decent amount of carries on the ground in addition to his receiving work through the air. He was very effective on the ground. So I think James Cook does have some good upside, and I never want to, knock on someone in their injury history, obviously. But Damian Harris has struggled, unfortunately, to make it through seasons. And should that happen, I don't feel like Nyheim Hines is highly, we want Nyheim Hines to be great, but I don't think he's going to be highly competitive compared to James Cook. We saw that last year. So Cook would have huge upside if, Damian Harris were to go down.
I agree with that quite a bit. I love myself some James Cook this season, but the best value on this team right now, it has to be Dawson Knox. With all the talk of Dalton Kincaid, people are already forgetting that Dawson Knox is the actual tight end on the Bills team this season. Knox is coming off a 6-touchdown campaign that saw him haul in 48 passes, 517 yards. Now, Kincaid, his production will likely come from the vacated targets from Isaiah McKenzie, Devin Singletary. That is, if Shakir doesn't get the rest of them. But I think Shakir is going to be looking over his shoulder because Deontay Hardy, he's there for a reason too for the Buffalo Bills team. So I'm not too sold on what that's going to look like there. So for me, it's Dawson Knox, best value. We know the tight end is a wasteland. We both like to typically punt the tight end position. So Dawson Knox could be that value play later on in drafts. Now, Tara, who's the one player from the Buffalo Bills team you do not want to leave your draft without?
You'll laugh at me for it being a round one guy, but if you have a back end round one pick, don't leave without Stefon Diggs. I talked about those numbers earlier with Josh Allen. Stefon Diggs was having that kind of bounce back season where he can be the overall wide receiver one. I think he's a top 5 lock. And he's someone that I feel like is a very strong back half of round one pick. So for sure, if you've got one of those picks back there and you're feeling a little uneasy about some of the, running back situations, Jonathan Taylor, a little bit, shaky in terms of how that's going to shake out with Anthony Richardson, Tony Pollard, love him. Maybe you're a little bit scared of, actual volume he'll be able to have. Stefon Diggs is just such a nice, safe round one pick.
That sounds like something that Major would be proud of, because you not really going out there on a pick there.
Taking kind of the safe one, right? Not everyone has to be the deepest sleeper in the world.
And you know what? We've seen Stefon Diggs drop into the middle of that second round, even sometimes the late second round, depending on the scoring system, tight end premium, super flex, whatever that looks like. For me, the one player I don't want to leave without, and we love this guy. We both love this guy. It's Damian Harris. He's going to be that touchdown vulture this season. New year, same Damian Harris. That being said, this is a new year. Will this be the same Buffalo Bills team? Hey, tune in, find out. The 2023 season is going to present all kinds of challenges this year in that AFC East division.